Welcome to the Wealth Dialogue. I'm Emily.
And I'm Jack.
You know the feeling? You sit down, maybe it's a Sunday night, with a fresh financial plan, pristine categories. You're feeling this, like, absolute financial optimism. You are so motivated.
This is the month?
This is the month I stick to the budget.
Mhm.
And then, like clockwork, maybe 2 weeks later, you look at your account and the numbers just, they don't match the plan. You're thinking, what went wrong? I did the math.
Yeah, and that moment, that feeling of financial whiplash, it's basically universal.
Right.
We really want to assure you listening, if your budget keeps failing, it is not because you are bad with money
Right.
or that you lack discipline. It's because the system itself, the budgeting system, is fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
It's just an unsustainable structure. It's designed for an algorithm, not for an actual human being.
And that really is the whole focus of this deep dive. Our
Right.
mission here is to challenge that fundamental assumption that budgeting is just math.
Right.
We're going to assert that, these failed budgets are almost always the result of a flawed system that just completely ignores human behavior and psychology.
That's it, exactly. Our goal is to give you practical behavioral solutions to fix the system, not to fix you, the person. Because frankly, it doesn't matter if you're making $2,000 a month or $20,000 a month.
Doesn't matter.
If the system is wrong, the budget will not work. It requires this unrealistic level of self-control that nobody has.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start with the big diagnosis here. Why does that shiny new spreadsheet always end up feeling like, I don't know, an oppressive enemy by the middle of the month? Why do most budgets just fail?
It really all comes down to what we call the perfection trap.
Okay.
People sit down and they try to build, a perfect budget instead of a realistic one. They plan as if they're a robot.
A robot.
Yeah, they account for every single fixed bill perfectly, but then they leave zero margin for error, zero margin for spontaneity. There's no room for life to actually happen.
So what you're saying is they're planning for a version of themselves that just flat out does not exist. This mythical person who never needs an unplanned snack, never impulse buys something on Amazon, and absolutely never decides to spontaneously grab dinner with a friend because it was a tough day.
Exactly. They assume a level of behavioral control that is, it's completely unrealistic for a human. And what it does is it induces something called decision fatigue. When you force yourself into these hyper-rigid micro categories, every single small purchase requires this mini debate with your budget plan. So when real life inevitably shows up,
And it always does.
it always does. When that small unexpected expense hits, the whole system just cracks because it was way too rigid to begin with.
And then that tiny little deviation that's seen as a total failure, which, leads to just abandoning the whole system.
Yep.
So the key insight is that the planning assumes absolute adherence and real life is anything but absolute.
Precisely. So if that's the diagnosis, planning for a robot, let's identify the single biggest mistake people make when they're actually allocating the funds, the internal flaw within the budget structure itself.
Okay, what is that biggest mistake?
It's the lack of flex money.
Flex money.
The single biggest mistake is failing to budget for surprises, for, mood days, or just for small treats.
Right.
We're humans. We need that psychological wiggle room, that kind of mental safety net.
Right.
When you create a budget that starves out those small human needs, you basically guarantee failure because you are just constantly hitting these invisible walls.
So the key takeaway here isn't really overspending by the user. The user is just, acting like a human.
Right.
The problem is under-planning by the system. The budget didn't account for the reality of just being alive.
It has to be supportive, not restrictive. And this is where we get into the core thesis of all of this. Budgeting is not primarily math. It's psychology and behavior.
Sure.
If your budget feels restrictive, if it feels punitive, you will naturally rebel against it. The only sustainable budget is one that feels supportive, that fits who you are, and that actually reduces your mental tax.
That reframing is so key for anyone listening right now who has failed at budgeting over and over again. You didn't fail the budget. The budget failed you because it was unsupportive.
We are building systems that work with our humanity, not systems that work against it.
All right, so let's move into the solutions. Give us the real stuff, the simple, practical steps. If someone listening wants to fix their current broken budget, what are the 6 specific behavioral shifts they need to make?
Okay, so we've distilled this down into 6 pretty simple steps that are all designed to increase resilience and decrease that decision fatigue we talked about.
Yeah.
Number 1, add a flex fund.
Okay.
This is your non-negotiable life happens category. And even a small amount, like say $50 to $100, is often enough to save your entire budget. This money is for the unexpected coffee, the lunch out, the random impulse buy. It's a release valve.
Okay, but I have a pushback on that right away. If I specifically budget flex money, doesn't that just give me permission to spend frivolous? I mean, how do we make sure this isn't just an excuse for bad discipline?
Yeah, that's a really common fear, but it kind of misses the behavioral point.
Yeah.
This fund isn't about promoting carelessness. It's about containing the inevitable spontaneity.
Containing it,
If
okay.
you spend $6 on a coffee, you pull it from your $75 flex fund and you stop. The alternative is spending that $6 feeling immense guilt because you broke the zero tolerance budget.
And then it all spirals.
And then you spiral into $200 of guilt spending because you already see yourself as having failed. The flex fund is the fire break. It prevents that total collapse.
Understood. So it's like an insurance policy against the guilt spiral. That $50 prevents $500 of unplanned spending later on. What's number 2?
Second, track spending weekly, not monthly. Monthly tracking is basically a postmortem.
Huh, yeah, it's too late.
It's way too late. By the time you review your expenses on the 30th, if you're way off track, the problem feels catastrophic. It feels defeating.
So why weekly? What makes that frequency so much more effective than, say, biweekly?
Because a week is just a manageable time frame for course correction. If you find on Sunday that you overspent $40 on food that week, okay, you can consciously adjust your grocery spending for the next 7 days.
Right.
The mistake is small, it's contained, and it's solvable. It prevents that compounding sense of defeat. Number 3, use broad categories, not specific restrictions. So don't mandate things like $0 for entertainment.
That never works.
It never works. Instead, focus on broad baskets. Food, fun and entertainment, essentials, savings, things like that.
That gives you freedom within the boundary, which is a really crucial psychological difference. It turns the budget into, like, guidance instead of a rigid set of rules.
Absolutely. Okay, 4th, automate essential bills. This removes the behavioral effort from your most important task. Make sure your rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance, all of that is never missed because the payments are automated.
So beyond the obvious math benefit, what's the behavioral value of automation?
It just radically reduces your mental anxiety and your decision fatigue. You eliminate that constant low-level stress of remembering due dates. Automation makes sure you're reliable, and it frees up your mental energy to focus on the parts of your budget that actually need daily management, like your discretionary spending. 5th, review your budget weekly. This doesn't need to be some huge financial event. It should just be a short routine check-in. We recommend a quick, maybe 5-minute review every Sunday morning, just to solidify your awareness of where your money's going.
And to prepare for the week ahead.
Exactly. Awareness is everything.
5 minutes is the key there. If it feels like a heavy chore, people are just going to skip it. But making it a routine 5-minute awareness check, that drastically increases the chance you'll stick with it.
And finally, number 6, allow for bad days. This might be the most crucial behavioral change of all. You are going to make mistakes. You are going to overspend once in a while. A realistic budget has to account for human error. Do not quit the entire budget after 1 or 2 missteps.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that connects so deeply to other self-improvement things. It's that classic failure mode where someone eats one piece of cake, decides the whole week is ruined, and then just throws out the entire diet.
It is the exact same failure logic. Instead of fixing the small leak, the one overspend people, just throw away the whole boat. The key to long-term success is to recognize the mistake, note it during your Sunday review, and immediately course correct for the next day or week. And, without judgment. That self-forgiveness piece is so crucial.
So I think the most important takeaway from those 6 points is that they're all designed to decrease friction and increase awareness. They're all behavioral hacks. They're not mathematical formulas. They make the budget softer, but stronger at the same time.
Precisely. We are building buffers for our humanity right into a financial structure.
Okay, so to make this really tangible, let's look at a real-life scenario. You mentioned this case study of Brandon, someone who was constantly redoing his budget only to fail 2 weeks later.
Yes. Brandon was just trapped in that perfection cycle. He kept redoing his spreadsheet every single month because he budgeted $0 for fun.
0.
And 0 for any spontaneous life stuff. Everything was allocated to either fixed expenses or these really aggressive savings goals.
A completely rigid robot budget.
The most robotic. And his system failed every single time because his real-life self just kept showing up. And the specific catalyst, the thing that caused him to abandon the whole system 1 month, it was a single $6 iced coffee purchase.
$6 broke the whole system. That seems impossible.
It wasn't about the amount. It was about the fact that the budget had zero room for life. That $6 was uncategorized, it was unplanned, and it immediately triggered this immense guilt, making him feel like a complete failure.
Wow.
And since he felt he'd already broken the budget, he just abandoned the whole thing for the rest of the month, which of course ended up costing him hundreds in unmanaged spending.
So that story just perfectly shows that the lack of room for human imperfection is what causes the total collapse. So what was the fix for Brandon?
We only implemented one of the 6 steps for him at first. We just added a small life happens category, that flex fund of $75.
That's it?
That's all. And suddenly, the iced coffee was covered. An unexpected parking fee was covered. And more importantly, that small fund gave him the psychological permission to enjoy a small reward, like a new comic book, which his old budget would have absolutely forbidden.
So he finally got to enjoy these little pleasures without the guilt, and that single change allowed him to actually stick to his budget for the first time in years.
It brought in the necessary behavioral support. He didn't earn more money, but the budget finally fit who he was. And that awareness, that support, it proved far more critical than any of the specific number crunching.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize everything we've talked about today, what is the ultimate key takeaway for you, the listener?
The key takeaway is really simple.
Yeah.
Budgeting is ultimately about awareness, it's about consistency, and it's about self-forgiveness. It's not about achieving some flawless mathematical perfection.
Yeah.
When you build a system that supports your human needs, your tendency for spontaneity, your occasional lack of foresight, your need for small rewards, that system becomes resilient.
And with the right supportive structure, the budget works for you instead of feeling like an enemy or, a constant source of guilt and restriction.
If you feel restricted, you will rebel. It's that simple. If you feel supported, you will succeed. Consistency beats perfection every single time.
That's a great note to end on, but before we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave you with one final thought to mull over as you approach your habits this week.
So if we accept that financial success is fundamentally about consistent habits and behavioral change, consider where else in your life you might be making a robot budget.
Interesting.
Where are you demanding absolute adherence? Whether it's with your time management, your diet, your exercise, think about applying the concept of the flex fund, that buffer for humanity, to that other area of your life. How could giving yourself a small, budgeted amount of grace prevent the whole boat from sinking in your health routine or your career goals?
Change the system, not the person. And that philosophy extends far beyond your bank account. Thank you for diving deep with us today.